this point, to this level of chaos, because this didn't happen overnight. 4 quick points to make us all remember. You know, we're in a busy news cycle and people sometimes forget the facts, but the Biden administration welcomed maybe as many as 20 million illegal aliens across that border and into our country in a 4-year period. Sanctuary states like California rolled out the welcome mat. They embraced it, the governor's failures. You know, Gavin Newsom's been in this effort for the last several months to try to reinvent himself, to rebrand himself, okay? It's pretty difficult to do when your state is a safe haven to violent, criminal, illegal aliens, and you're the one at the helm. You can't hide this stuff. That's not my lane. I'm not going to give you legal analysis on whether Gavin Newsom should be arrested, but he ought to be tarred and feathered, I'll say that. I mean, look, he's standing in the way of the administration and the carrying out of federal law, right? He is applauding the bad guys and standing in the way of the good guys. He is trying to, he's a participant, an accomplice in our federal law enforcement agents being not just disrespected, but assaulted. It's really an interesting time in America and in American politics. Republicans are governing well, and we are delivering on our promises, and we are bringing solutions, and we're working around the clock every day to make sure that that is delivered for the people as we promised them last year on the campaign trail. Meanwhile, Democrats are engaging in the applause of destruction of cities and all sorts of chaos. The contrast is so clear, and everybody can see it. And we had all the Republicans gathered together for our weekly meeting here just in the last hour, and we showed them poll after poll after poll that confirms what we all know intuitively. The American people see who is doing the job, and they are losing their tolerance for the nonsense by the Democratic Party, and you can't make this stuff up. We talked a lot this morning about what's happening in Los Angeles because it is such a great exhibit to show what is happening. A picture's worth 10,000 words, of course. You know, while the rioters have been burning police cars and looting storefronts and physically assaulting law enforcement officers, it's important to remember how we got to this point, to this level of chaos, because this didn't happen overnight. 4 quick points to make us all remember. You know, we're in a busy news cycle and people sometimes forget the facts, but the Biden administration welcomed maybe as many as 20 million illegal aliens across that border and into our country in a 4-year period. Sanctuary states like California rolled out the welcome mat. They embraced it. They offered aliens protection from federal law enforcement. Think of it. They're on the wrong side of the law. And they provided them with health care and housing and taxpayer-funded benefits. It's truly almost unbelievable, incredible what these Democrat leaders of these cities and states have done. President Trump delivered on an ironclad mandate from the American people. And just as we said throughout the entire Biden administration disaster, the law always allowed the president to stop it, and President Trump did it with bold visionary leadership. He stopped the invasion of our country, and he engaged in the largest mass deportation effort in U.S. history. We're in the midst of that right now. Rioters, acting on the words of politicians like AOC and Hakeem Jeffries, are trying to stop this effort by burning storefronts and endangering the lives of patriotic law enforcement officers. The contrast could not be any more clear. Time and time again, innocent, hardworking Americans have been harmed by the failed leadership of Democrat governors like Gavin Newsom. President Trump was absolutely right to send in the National Guard and to clean up for the governor's failures. You know, Gavin Newsom's been in this effort for the last several months to try to reinvent himself, to rebrand himself, okay? It's pretty difficult to do when your state is a safe haven to violent, criminal, illegal aliens, and you're the one at the helm. You can't hide this stuff. The President of the United States has a responsibility to maintain law and order, particularly when the lives and livelihoods of federal law enforcement officers are threatened. What we're doing there with the federal forces is we are protecting federal buildings and property and personnel, and the President is showing strong leadership in doing so. Because, you know, it's those men and women, the federal law enforcement officers, who deserve our support right now. And the One Big Beautiful Bill, by the way, as Leader Scalise noted, delivers much-needed reinforcements. In this bill, we have funding to hire a minimum of 10,000 new ICE agents. We're going to provide a $10,000 bonus to Border Patrol and ICE agents on the front lines. We're going to include $45 billion to expand ICE detention capacity and $14.4 billion for air and ground transport to carry out at least 1 million deportations every single year. We'll have to do that for quite some time because they let so many people in. We're starting with the dangerous illegal aliens, and that is exactly who the rioters, and the politicians in California are trying to protect, and it's incredible. While Republicans are supporting the men and women of ICE through the One Big Beautiful Bill, Democrats are fighting for those illegal aliens and against law enforcement agents. They're defending the violent anti-ICE protesters in LA. They visited a violent MS-13 gang member and human trafficker in El Salvador. They charged an ICE facility and clashed with ICE officers. That was members of the House of Representatives doing that. They're advocating for people to dox ICE agents and making them targets for threats from radicals. And they're calling for the elimination of ICE. Don't forget what ICE stands for. People get caught up in the acronyms or lost in the acronyms. The U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, okay? It is to enforce federal law. It is to enforce a secure border. And the Democrats want to defund that. Just let that settle on you a bit. They're even trying to hide it, and they're not even trying to hide it, okay? They're openly advocating for illegals instead of American citizens. I don't know. We could talk about this all morning, and we have. Let me move on. With regard to the business in the House this week, the House will vote to approve the White House's request to claw back $9.4 billion in wasteful spending. $8.3 billion of that is wasteful foreign aid with all the atrocities that DOJ uncovered in USAID, and $1.1 billion for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. That's PBS, NPR. These are common sense cuts, and I think every member of this body should support it. It's a critical step in restoring fiscal sanity and beginning to turn the tides of removing fraud, waste, and abuse from our government. Have you checked the public opinion polls? That's what the American people want, and they demand and deserve, and we're going to do it. I read some of the greatest hits last week out of this, but I just want to list a few more examples, okay? Last week he gave you some of the real high-level, high-number amounts, but these are lower dollars, but they matter. Listen to this, $33,000 we're going to cut. That was being used for, quote, being LGBT in the Caribbean. No kidding. American taxpayers are funding that. $8,000 for promoting vegan food in Zambia. $67,000 for feeding insect powder to kids in Madagascar. You'll notice these aren't particularly expensive examples of wasteful spending, but compared to these other massive categories of government bloat. But I list those because it's an illustration here. Every dollar matters. We are serious about this. The Republican Party is doing everything we can to be careful stewards of the precious treasure of the people. And the Democrats want to waste it and send it to their NGO pet projects and just all this crazy stuff. We're not going to fund our transgender operas in Peru anymore. Once we found that out, we had a responsibility to go stop it, and we will. This rescission package is a critical step, and it's one of many. There'll be several of these that will come from the White House. We'll work together with the administration to cut out all the fraud, waste, and abuse. We're fighting a multi-front war against the deficit. Don't get lost in this, okay? This is a multi-step process. I've tried to explain on all the interviews I've done over the last couple of weeks. The One Big Beautiful Bill is going to reduce spending by over $1.6 trillion, as has been noted this morning. The rescission package will rescind $9.4 billion in wasteful spending, the first of many of those. The annual appropriations process will allow Republicans to further codify DOJ cuts and spend less money and be careful stewards of each dime. And the revenues found from the president's tariff agenda will also reduce the deficit by $2.8 trillion over 10 years. This is real money, and we're going to turn that aircraft carrier. You don't turn it on a dime, you've all heard me say. You can't make deficits and debt disappear overnight, but we're at it. And we're going to continue this step-by-step process to get our fiscal house in order and do right by the taxpayers. We're chipping away at it every day, and the rescissions vote on Thursday is an important signal. House Republicans are serious about getting our fiscal house in order, and we'll do that. All right, let me take a few questions. Front row.
Speaker Johnson, the president said, possibly in jest, that if he were Tom Homan, he would arrest Gavin Newsom. Do you believe that Newsom should face consequences in a legal way?
That's not my lane. I'm not going to give you legal analysis on whether Gavin Newsom should be arrested, but he ought to be tarred and feathered, I'll say that. I mean, look, he's standing in the way of the administration and the carrying out of federal law, right? He is applauding the bad guys and standing in the way of the good guys. He is trying to, he's a participant, an accomplice in our federal law enforcement agents being not just disrespected, but assaulted. This is a serious problem, and the governor is now filing a lawsuit against the president. What a joke. Do your job, man. That's what I tell Gavin Newsom. Do your job. Stop working on your rebranding and be a governor. stand up for the rule of law. He's not doing that. So I don't know what the ultimate measure will be there, but I know that in the interim time, the President of the United States is showing real leadership, and we're not going to allow LA to burn. We've seen this movie before, right? This thing gets out of hand real quickly, especially in a big city like that. And if local and state officials are unwilling or unable to do their job, the President of the United States will do his, and we support that fully. Yes, ma'am, in the middle.
What is the administration's response to Mexican President Sheinbaum's refusal to condemn the riots in LA? And does this affect President Trump's relationship with Sheinbaum?
I don't know. You have to ask the White House that. I mean, I gotta handle our affairs over here. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What is your reaction to Congresswoman Maxine Waters repeatedly saying that there has been no violence in the LA riots? And do you believe that Democrats are making a mistake by not talking about what's really going on here?
Clearly, the Democrats are making a mistake by taking the wrong side here, and I'm just going to, in my southern gentlemanly way, say bless her heart to Maxine Waters. I don't even know how to comment on Maxine Waters anymore. It's madness. I'm going to be charitable and leave it right there. Yes, sir. Right here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So new reporting suggests that no tax on tips and no tax on overtime could be scaled back from the One Big Beautiful Bill if they aren't viewed as pro-growth. Have you talked to some senators that are skeptical of that, like Senator Johnson? And you've said before that there isn't a plan B, but if that does come back to the House without these provisions, is it time to go back to the drawing board?
Well, look, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime are big promises the president made to the people, and we all echoed that on the campaign trail. I've talked to my good friend, Senator Ron Johnson, multiple times, most recently, I think it was last night or night before last, it was on Sunday, because he was on some shows and I was on some shows and we were comparing notes. And I told him, look, we all agree with our Senate colleagues who believe we need to cut more and more government waste, fraud, and abuse, obviously. But I told him, reminded him of the reality of the delicate balance we have in the House and the fact that we have a very broad caucus and we have, I've got 170 additional personalities to deal with than they do in the Senate, and it takes a while to meet this equilibrium point. So, look, I think the promise on no tax on tips and no tax on overtime is very important to the president. It's very important to hardworking Americans. And what we're so proud of our reconciliation bill is that it is truly geared and written for middle and lower class earning Americans, hardworking Americans who are trying to feed their families and make ends meet. They are the ones that are going to benefit from this bill. The Republican Party is the party of the working class, and we are demonstrating that with our legislation. And no tax on tips and no tax on overtime, for some people, they may not think that's a big thing, but for hardworking folks, a lot of them, millions and millions of Americans, that is a big thing to them, and I think it's an important promise for us to keep.
Last
Yes.
question.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Speaker, switching gears a bit, the FACE Act. It's right now being marked up in the Judiciary Committee. Plan to bring it to the floor, and the importance for the Republican Party and leadership of bringing this to the floor.
Yeah, look, it's a big commitment of ours. Applaud Chairman Jim Jordan and the Judiciary. He always does a great job handling that. It's a big priority. We have to protect free speech. We've got to protect what are actual peaceful protests, and we got to stand for our core principles. I think all that's wrapped up in that legislation, and I expect it'll go well, and I expect we'll pass it through the House when it comes through committee. So one last question. Yeah.
Speaker Johnson, just running back to the LA protests.
Yes.
Is there a red line for congressional Republicans regarding President Trump's use of executive authority to, say, deploy federal law enforcement or these 700 Marines? Is there a situation, say, if he invoked the Insurrection Act or directed federal law enforcement to arrest Governor Newsom, that would make Congress step in as a check?
Look, I'm not going to engage in hypotheticals, but I've said very clearly, I was sitting next to the president at the White House yesterday when some of these questions were asked. He is fully within his authority right now to do what he is doing, and we have to maintain order. It's the number one job. Think of it, y'all. The number one job of government is to protect the citizenry from foreign threats and domestic threats. And federal law enforcement is doing their job. Those are the heroes, and we've got to protect them, and federal employees as well, and federal buildings and property. We're not going to let violent criminals destroy the property of U.S. taxpayers. President Trump has put his hand on the table and said, not on my watch, and we applaud that. So we're standing with him. Thank you all.